Before I begin, I'd like to give a warning that much of the content of this video is graphic. There are illustrations of violence, corpses, and skeletons, and one photograph depicting full frontal nudity, which I will censor, which could also be seen as implying violence against women. There is also content relating to suicide, murder, and animal cruelty. After the wave of early black metal and the subsequent Norwegian black metal wave, led by bands such as Mayhem, Burzum, and Darkthrone, the scene was further developed by new groups in Scandinavia and beyond. In Sweden, several groups arose, many of which were described as melodic death metal and melodic black metal. Among these groups was Dissection. Formed in 1989, Dissection played a more melodic style compared to the pioneers of the black metal genre, a style that has been called, quote, melancholic and atmospheric, end quote. Their second album, Storm of the Light's Bane, became a landmark release in the history of black metal. The band's reputation was particularly bolstered by their vocalist and guitarist, John Neutveit, who was convicted of being an accessory to murder in 1997 in the Kahlers Park murder case, where Joseph Ben Madour, an Algerian national living in Sweden, was killed by Neutveit and Shahin Khoshnod Shadis. Neutveit was imprisoned until 2004 and would eventually commit suicide in 2006, shortly after the release of Dissection's third full-length album, Rain Chaos. Despite their turbulent career, Dissection is still influential, particularly in the Swedish scene. John Neutveit was a member of the misanthropic Luciferian order, hereby termed the MLO, an occult Gnostic order founded in Sweden in 1995. The MLO was founded by Shahin Khoshnod Shadis, an Iranian national settled in Sweden who was also involved in the Kahlers Park murder case. He was also known as Vlad Nemesis Khoshnod Shadis, Noxifer, and Frater Nemidial. At one point, he also changed his name to Victor Draconi. According to Dr. Andrew M. Henry of YouTube channel Religion for Breakfast, historically, the term Gnostic has had numerous applications. Gnosticism, as a term, quote, was invented by modern scholars to account for a family of writings, persons, and beliefs that all reflect a similar theme, end quote. Gnosticism is characterized as an esoteric and mystical belief system, and as an arch-heresy in Christianity. Dr. Henry outlines 3 basic Gnostic clichés. These are religious beliefs attributed to Gnosticism without necessarily applying to all texts identified as Gnostic. In the case of the MLO, these 3 clichés do indeed apply. These clichés are: 1. Dualistic anthropology. The MLO makes a distinction between cosmos and chaos. Cosmos takes the place of the material world. It is inferior and lacking compared to what is identified as the spiritual realm, which is chaos. 2. Dualistic theology. The MLO identifies a weak and cowardly material god, or demiurge, as the inferior god of the cosmos, while the god of chaos is the higher, perfect god. This god is identified as a satanic force. And 3. Primacy for secret knowledge. To become a member of the MLO, quote, one must already be an anti-cosmic Satanist and actively practicing black magician, end quote. The order also highlights the importance of esoteric knowledge and secret rituals. The symbol of the Serpentine Dragon is explicitly one used for the higher god and for the superiority of chaos. Early black metal imagery did not make much use of dragons or serpents. Goats, devils, skeletons, imagery of violence, and forests were more prevalent, especially in the Norwegian second wave. Dragons were popular in power metal, however, and still are. Bands like Rhapsody, now Rhapsody of Fire, and Blind Guardian made frequent use of dragons in their album art, though the style of these images is heavily inspired by fantasy artwork, and especially the style associated with role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons. The dragon of popular fantasy media draws on a mix of different ideas and conceptions of the dragon. It could be the final boss of a campaign, or a smaller challenge for characters, maybe part of a larger race of wild animals, or even sentient and helpful dragons who talk and give advice, such as Draco in the 1996 fantasy film Dragonheart. The dragons of Swedish black metal, however, draw from two branches: ancient Middle Eastern and Mediterranean mythology, and medieval Judeo-Christian lore. Medieval rabbinical lore is important to note, as these bands make overt references to Kabbalah, and Lilith is a key figure in the occult. In rabbinical lore, Lilith is the serpent in Eden that tempted Adam and Eve, not Satan, and then she spawned a serpentine female race called Lilim. She also copulated with the fallen angel Samael in a cave. Samael and Lilith are key deities in the MLO. Otherwise, these Swedish black metal dragons are most alike to serpentine monsters of the ancient world. These are embodiments of chaos that are eventually slain by male warrior gods, often associated with light, storms, and the sun. It is these warrior gods that are explicitly vilified by the MLO, such as Zeus and Marduk. According to Dr. David E. Jones, the mythological phenomenon of the dragon is a composite of three predators: the snake, the lion, and the bird of prey, that hunted the ancestors of humans, and thus it became a sort of cognitive boogeyman that represents the ultimate man-eating monster. This would make the dragon an ideal symbol for death, misanthropy, and power. In Sweden, the use of occult and esoteric symbolism became more popular. This video will discuss the iconography and graphics used by 4 contemporary Swedish black metal bands. These bands are Watain, Grafvitnir, Ondskapt, and Mephorash. Before discussing these bands, however, it's necessary to contextualize elements of their ideology more clearly, beginning with their interpretation of Gnosticism. Ondskapt from Stockholm call themselves religious orthodox black metal, and though no allegiance to any specific religious movement has been stated by their frontman, Charles Axel Cornelius Axelsson Johnson, pseudonym Akerbus, he has confirmed that he supports left-hand path movements and has been in contact with several. Akerbus rarely names direct musical or ideological influences. However, one band he has mentioned is Offermod, another Swedish black metal band whose frontman, Belfegor, is a member of the Dragon Rouge, a left-hand path organization founded in Sweden. Like bands affiliated with the MLO, the Dragon Rouge-affiliated band Offermod writes lyrics with the themes of Luciferianism, Chaos Gnosticism, and others. According to their Metal Archives profile, Ondskapt lyrical themes include these, as well as left-hand path, Satanism, death worship, occultism, and evil. Their link to dissection is tenuous, but as with other 3 bands to be discussed later, their imagery stresses death, ritual, and their logo features leathery dragon wings as well as an inverted cross and a curved shape added. This is potentially a sickle, a common visual symbol along with the scythe for death, which was also used extensively by Dissection, and used on the Reaping Death artwork by Watain. Of the bands in this video, Grafvitnir from Stockholm are the most mysterious. The name of the band comes from Norse mythology and is one of the 9 lindworms, or giant serpent or serpentine dragons who live at the roots of the cosmological Yggdrasil tree. References to Norse myth are relatively rare among these left-hand path bands, but it is worth noting that their namesake is another reference to draconic serpents and forces of destruction. Luciferianism is listed as a lyrical theme on their Metal Archives profile as well, along with occultism, dark heathendom, and witchcraft. Due to the secretive nature of the band, their adherence to either the MLO or Dragon Rouge isn't clear. However, their lyrics and artwork contain numerous references to serpents and dragons, chaos, the black light, Sitra Ahra, death, the theme of a slumbering dragon to be awakened, and eclipses. They also name agents listed as religiously significant to the MLO, such as Apep, Samael, and Lilith. Mephorash were formed in 2010 and, like Watain, are from Uppsala. Ideologically, the band are also linked to Satanic left-hand path religious movements. Some of their lyrics are written by an occult author who writes under the pseudonym Giles de Laval. Mephorash's Metal Archives profile lists their lyrical themes as misanthropy, occultism, and Clyfoth, which is certainly consistent with the other bands discussed. Of these bands, Mephorash includes the most direct references to Kabbalah through Hebrew words as track and album titles and through the use of Hebrew text on visuals. Undoubtedly, one of the most successful and well-known active black metal bands from Uppsala, Sweden, Watain also have the closest and clearest link to Dissection. Watain's vocalist, Eric Danielsson, was once the bassist for Dissection, and reportedly a close friend of John Neutveit. In terms of religious adherence, Danielsson has said of the MLO that they are the only satanic organization he fully supports. Watain draw on familiar lyrical themes previously touched on: anti-cosmic Satanism, Luciferianism, chaos Gnosticism, death worship, and darkness. Each of these four Swedish bands employ different artists and visual motifs to represent their music and ideology, but there are common themes. All the images use strong contrasts, often very stark, using only black and white. If any color is used, the most common color is red, though Ondskapt use other warm shades of amber and ochre. There are numerous depictions of skulls, skeletons, and bones. Some of these images draw on the artistic traditions of the Danse Macabre. These are visual representations of the theme of death worship, a rejection of life and embrace of fatality. None of these bands make a point of romanticizing or glorifying nature. There are various symbolic depictions of chaos, sometimes through the motif of a swirling vortex, or through the multiple heads of great monstrous serpentine dragons. The Serpentine Dragon itself is a flexible symbol that can stand for death or the powerful forces of chaos, as well as the embrace of chaos and rejection of the cosmic material world. The images are very detailed, made to look as if they're engravings or etchings, often featuring heavy ornamental and decorative aspects. Hebrew and Latin text is sometimes used as decoration as well. The human figure is never untouched by some form of violence or change. It appears either as a skeleton or merged with monstrous qualities such as demon wings, animalistic limbs, or a combination thereof, such as on Watain's Reaping Death artwork. Aside from skewing human forms as artistic subject matter, replacing it with the chaotic nemesis of humans, the Serpentine Dragon, this is another strategy for visually representing the theme of misanthropy. I'd also like to discuss the medievalist bent of these images. They are all clearly modern, but are designed to look old. They are worn, cracked, grainy, or scratched, evoking the idea of medieval imagery. This is a sort of neo-medievalism, as defined by Dr. Amy S. Kaufman. In her words, neo-medievalism is, quote, an idea of the Middle Ages gained not through contact with the Middle Ages, but through a medievalist intermediary, end quote. In this case, the intermediary would be the works of artists such as Albrecht Dürer, Gustave Doré, or William Blake. Another aspect of medievalism observed is the concept of Bowelism. Brenda S. Gardenour Walter has pointed out the theme of the, quote, chaotic lower abdomen, end quote, in black metal, as well as the fascination with decay, carnality, inversion, and the grotesque. In binary medieval Christian cosmology, the abdomen was indeed associated with earthly sin. The intestines, the genitals, and the bowels were of the lower realm, while the head and the heart were of the higher, sacred realm. Dissection rose to prominence as a melodic black metal band in the wake of the Norwegian second wave. This came with musical evolution and different stylistic variations and sonic development, but it also pushed at the transgressive limits of the subgenre practically. Bands like Dissection, Gardenour, and Watain, coming after the notorious second wave of black metal from Norway, had pushed the transgressive boundaries to their breaking point in the early 2000s. Watain had showered audiences with pig's blood, and Gardenour's highly controversial Black Mass Krakow 2004 concert included not only the use of sheep's blood, but also nude performers in mock crucifixion on stage. One member of Dissection had also been involved in a murder in 1997. As pointed out by black metal musicians such as Haelle Ravenna Hunt Hendricks, in terms of transgressive behavior, very little else could be done that wouldn't result in more death or more jail time for scene members. This would be impractical, if nothing else, for musicians if they wanted to keep making music. Not all bands turned to draconic serpentine imagery, but for Swedish bands involved in left-hand path movements, this became a convention due to the symbolic significance of the dragon serpent and the flexibility of the dragon as a visual symbol. It can stand for the old dragon of Revelations, or represent any number of draconic entities listed by the movement such as Apep or Dahaka or Leviathan. It can be a symbol of death, chaos, or misanthropy, as well as a figure of supernatural power. I expect there will be even more images of dragons in black metal in the future.